Buenas and half a day. My name is Jonathan Frank Blas Diaz, and I am an unregistered voter of and on the island of Guam, protesting the United States Supreme Court and the United States District Court of Guam's verdict and decision on the Arnold Dave Davis lawsuit against the government of Guam, which equalizes the elections that have illegally taken place under the United Nations Charter for those who are indigenous aboriginals on and of the island of Guam. The Arnold Dave Davis lawsuit was against the Guam Election Commission, especially when it concerns the Decolonization Commission's registration for Chamorro. In that decision, Judge Francis Tidinko Gatewood decided that it was racist and that Chamorros who have registered under this registry for the decolonization or plebiscite vote are racist, using reverse racism as a way to say that all of the problems of racism on the island of Guam is the doings of being Chamorro. And I think that when we take a look at history, we have to ask several questions when it comes to residency requirements for voting, because Arnold Dave Davis is no longer a resident of Guam. Perhaps he still pays taxes to the island of Guam, but my understanding is that he is a resident of the 50 contiguous states, and he filed with a nonprofit 501c3 back in Washington, D.C., and they have no residency requirements yet. They have filed and prevailed. But we have to ask the question, back in the 1980s, when Arnold Dave Davis was a resident of Guam, working at one of the two military bases on the island of Guam, why he did not file his case then in the 1980s, when in fact Chamorros did assert their right to vote under the Decolonization Registry for a plebiscite of the Commonwealth Act of Guam. Those two things, being a resident of the island of Guam in the 1980s, as well as the actual vote that took place for the Guam Commonwealth Act took place, was not considered by Judge Francis Tidinko Gatewood, nor entered into the conversation between time-based or race-based decisions at the U.S. courts. And therefore, this one-sided relationship is not a loving relationship, as some have regarded in the past. So I am here to give you my platform as to why I am protesting and why today I am not a registered voter. But why is it important to constantly look for a job? So since 2008, I have entered my name as a Democrat or a Republican or an independent to show you the inequalities when it comes to political parties bullying, as well as corporate media's non-favoritism of the great debate. And that great debate is one of being, hypocritical. Why am I using the English language to further communicate, my initiatives? And then why is it that, a program, let's say, for example, in the mornings with one person needs to be shut off? I think the platform today is that here on the island of Guam is to make sure that some of our media groups understand full well the rights and responsibilities. And so I would like to share with you what I sent to the Guam Election Commission on November 3rd. And was sent to all media groups, and not one single one of them, when it came to radio or newsprint, ever contacted me back regarding this issue of write-ins. The write-in candidacy for the non-voting delegate, believe it or not, there are no rules and regulations for write-ins at the Federal Election Commission, because the position of Washington delegate or non-voting delegate is a position that is only meant for a certain short period of time. When Senator Burton in the 1970s decided to have a non-voting delegate, it was only for a very short time. It was only supposed to be a very short time to have a non-voting delegate. And so, because of gradualism and paternalism, other insular cases, or insular territories like the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas was gradually given a non-voting delegate. But the position of non-voting delegate was supposed to be not one of permanent second-class citizenship at the U.S. House of Representatives. It was supposed to be a very limited time. And therefore, when we take a look at the issues of write-ins, the U.S. Congress needs to make those rules and regulations and order the Federal Election Commission to, have a certain kind of understanding. Here on Guam, this is where the local, Guam legislature decided what does it mean to be a write-in candidate, and actually put it into law, overstepping their boundaries. It's almost as if they are the ones that are telling the federal government how high to jump, and how low to go. And I think that when we take a look at how these things are passed on the island of Guam and then translated to U.S. Congress, we cannot just usurp, the United States federal government. We may disagree with them, but we will not defraud them. They are members of our community. But this is one of people being silenced and unregistered today, maimed by the local media, spinned off in the sensationalism of trying to get page views, for example. So this is the letter that I sent, but I'm not going to go fully into it because it is political move. Any kind of throwing your name out there for consideration in a resume or a curriculum vitae is basically, a political move. But the issue is still one of slavery, and that slavery matters still today as a result of the gold rush. So when you think of people who have passed away from coronavirus and COVID-19 and any of its variants, and there have been boosted and they have been vaccinated, and they are still getting contaminated. They're still getting positive, testing positive for coronavirus. So when we take a look at Guam's minimum wage, which is not a living wage, a living wage is anything over $20 here on the island of Guam, only because of high inflation and the issues of importation of goods. So the issue that I want to make sure that people understand is, why did, let's say, for example, when we take a look at the ballot, why did it take a long time for the Guam Election Commission to finally honor and reflect its commission members? Because in the past, it was only just two sides, Republican, Democrat, and underneath there was a write-in. Why in this election cycle, there is, three columns. That third column is the write-in. And, it took a lot, of back and forth really with the Guam Election Commission to actually get that third column. And that third column is that anyone who is a U.S. citizen, in good standing with both the federal government and the state or the territory, can run for public office. What is so difficult about that? And why is that so offensive? I don't know. But again, my name is Jonathan Diaz, and please write me in for the non voting delegate seat. And I'm an unregistered voter, just like you, and just like many other people. You can go into any precinct, present your ID, whether, this is the contestation is, why do I have to be a registered voter? That's the premise. If I'm a U.S. citizen, why do I have to be a registered voter? And it's set up that way to some degree, and we don't know. I mean, I don't know, because if you're a U.S. citizen, you show your ID, you should get a ballot. But it's the reason why it's registered is because they give you the option, right, for these political parties, official political parties, identify yourself as Democrat or Republican, but it's optional, right? But usually people would put down Democrat or Republican, Green Party, Independent Party, People's Party, Popular Party, Territorial Party, but there's still an ongoing protest with the Popular Party and Territorial Party being converted into Republican Party and Democratic Party. There's still an ongoing protest. It's in the 1949 walkout. It has not ceased, and it has not silenced, and it grows. So the issue that we want to, claim is, first is, why do I have to be a registered voter? Right? Because, here we are as Chamorros registering for the plebiscite, decolonization registry, and then we got hurt by a, one-sided, it's like, how does Francis Tadinko get, a position there? Well, you have to be a lawyer and part of a lawyer guild. You have to be, part of the exempted class, right? And then a president of the United States would recommend your name, just the same as a U.S. Attorney General. And in that process of confirmation hearing, we see that there's only two sides in the U.S. Supreme Court when they're supposed to be nonpartisan. It's like, so in this, supermajority learning about, second Tuesday after Monday, is that we got hurt. We weren't speaking English, at the turn of the century. So many who were trained like lawyers and getting schooled back in the States, and they came back to Guam, those individuals hurt us because the issue of translation wasn't there. So that's the first thing is, why do I have to be a registered voter, right? Because the issue is one of 1898 time period, right? Spanish-American War. The second is World War II, right? 1950. And then there was a gap there, from 43, 44, 45, 46. There was a gap there, right? So when we take 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, there was a gap. We weren't US citizens there. That's very shady. But you were, taken, in 1945, and then 5 years. What happened in that 5 years? To 1950. So there's that gray area, right? So we never left. You know what I mean? It's like, this descendants, right, from 1898, right? You can have your registry there, your blood quantum or whatever your genetic makeup, and then all the way till now. But in that process, there was that gray area. And that gray area is what we are going to ask the US courts and the international courts. And I think that we need to set precedents. And this is part of setting precedents, because rather than going into a, let's say, court system that is one-sided or two-sided only, right? If it's only one-sided, well, you know, who's going to vote against you? The other one? Do you need a third kind of thing, right? Because if two parties are disagreeing, you need that third party. Okay, well, how the courts, evolved was from the locality. How so disputes and the courts really came from England. The evolution of that whole thing came from England, and a lot of it was about land disputes. A lot of it was about cattle disputes. So many other issues, and then it evolved into something where the third party would write their decision, right? And then from there they would, so to go pro se that, and this is the issue when my video was stolen from Facebook in 2019, and this is the part that was edited out. I think the most violent part is filing pro se. I was like, I want to be violent, and that issue of violent is one for me that when things are written down and they are submitted to a body, right, within a democracy, it is violent because you're gambling, so it leads to this kind of gambling, and whether or not you're going to be favored or not favored. And I think that anytime you throw yourself out there with a resume or a curriculum vitae, you're making that political risk, whether you're going to be liked or disliked. And that's part of life, But the issue that I want to present is we have had no choice. Here we are. We're not going anywhere, But for some reason, they want to push indigenous aboriginals out of their homelands because new immigrants want you to forget the connection to homelands. So they target you, economically, so you won't survive. And so this pushing out, or this the wanting of permanent the permanence of a permanent welfare state. So you need us. You need our food stamps. You need our SNAP here. And I said, no. And that came with, several other people's determination of like free states or, republics in the Pacific, where you want us, you need our food stamps. How are you going to survive? You need us. And that whole ideology, that because look at those people over there. You see, our people over there are so homeless, and it's so true. So the issue of one of the rich remaining rich and getting richer, and the poor remaining poor, becoming non-human. It's a disgrace. So that whole process of anything is one of contestation. So the issue that I want to present in the first platform is, why do Chamorros have to pay taxes? And Chamorros of and on the island Guam should not be paying land taxes. And the reason why we make that is because before we opened up immigration in the 1970s, we created these programs to safeguard Indigenous and Aboriginal programs and Indigenous and Aboriginal interests. Soon into the future, we will become and are already a minority in our homelands. That has been duly noted, and now it seems that the genocide taking place is not just physical, but it's also done in an economic way, pushing you out. And so, as unregistered voters, right? Why do I have to be registered voter? So that's the first thing that we need to make sure, because you want to be a good citizen. You know, you need to go out there and serve the community, and I have done. But the way it's framed by others who dislike me, who have interest, who have something to hide, does the greater disservice to those who are and have been hurt. And instead of remaining as a victim, we have to try to thrive as a survivor, because we're going to get pushed down again. And so, in order to get up, we must ensure that we reach out to the community to understand the community's interest and ultimately goal. Because if we are not forward thinking in looking at teleology, and I don't want to use these academic Western terms, but if we're not looking into the future and we're not stopping ourselves now, then it becomes even that much more detrimental to the next generation down the line. So the platform here is to put into practice this issue of ongoing active and passive resistance in the silent majority. And we are a silent majority only because we have to work with the administering power in the United States administration, to which we never had an opportunity to tell the United Nations, yes, no. We want French Polynesia. French Polynesia also did it. The United Nations says, okay, French Polynesia, you're going to have France as your administering power. But we never said, no, we don't want that. French Polynesia. The same thing with Micronesia. Just territorialship of the Pacific, United States of America. And we never all came together and said, no, we don't want that. We never have had the opportunity to tell the United Nations or even the administering power, no, we don't want your relationship. We want something else. So it becomes very, very clear to me what is necessary is that by being called racist and putting it into an actual verdict, overturning the decolonization registry becomes that much more of the effort to take it to the International Criminal Court. And this is the precedent. I am a registered decolonized, registry for the plebiscite, and I have been, and then here's the proof, right? And I have been, maimed, prejudice, stereotype, racism, and I can't find a job. And they want me to get food stamps, and I say no because that's fraud. So and I don't want to defraud, something that I disagree with, someone who I disagree with. I might disagree with them, but I'm not going to go and defraud them. So it becomes very clear to me, this conflict of interest, because even me communicating to you in this diplomatic language of English, in order to be understood, does a great disservice to the indigenous Aboriginal community. If I go on front of the United Nations Assembly and I use the English language, or if I go to in front of the, special committee of 14 or whatever, and I use English instead of my indigenous Aboriginal language, and you hire your translators in your respective country, it does a great disservice. And I'm really doing a great disservice using the English language, to communicate on YouTube. But in order that, it's not misconstrued or mistranslated, because it can be, but that's why we're, trying to implement, control, who's going to interpret the way these words come out and how it comes out. But name consideration is very important, and to understand conflict of interest. From the time the 1970s came, when this non-voting delegate position, so how do we do it? I encourage my competitors. They are my competitors. They have always been my competitors. And that's the disservice. Then bringing our people together, after the election, we're sorely divided still, sorely abused, right? So it becomes very important, if we are mature enough as people, my competitors, is to resign from position. There is a section in the code annotated, the Guam code annotated, where you can resign from your position, and it becomes very you have risk, but both of you have vested retirements. I have none. You work with the administering power and the status quo, and you have those positions of comfort for the future, but it's not true security. And so I asked today for my competitors to, resign from their position effective immediately. And the fear that you have, I know there's fear. It's like, well, if I do that and he doesn't, do it both together. So there won't be a non-voting delegate from Guam to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2023, as a strong protest, peaceful, nonviolent protest to Judge Francis Tadinko Gatewood, and really making sure that our Chamorro peoples are properly represented at the United Nations. You cannot go to the United Nations as a Democrat. You cannot go to the United Nations as a Republican, because it's exactly the same thing. It's a disservice. You have to remember that the Popular Party still exists on the island. You have to remember that the Territorial Party still exists on the island. And hegemony, is so important, for the conversation of being dispossessed. So don't think that just because you're roots and you decided and you voted back then, you change. Because there are 6 missing senators in 1949, 1950, still today. There's only 15 Guam senators. It's supposed to be 21. But even then, they didn't want 21. There was more. Remember, there was more U.S. Congress, Guam Congress members than 21. That's the point. It's not to forget, not to divorce yourself from history or the people or the land, the sea. So once you start disconnecting, then you're doing a disservice to others. So here I am being very, connected to you to understand and be transparent about it. Because if we are not, protesting, there's a statutes of limitations, as you know. When that court precedent, we've already had 1 election cycle, 2 election cycles. I don't know when that verdict, and I don't care, quite honestly, because it's not our jurisdiction. And the conflict of interest is Tadinko a Chamorro last name? If it appears in the registry, Chamorro registry, if it appears in 1899 registry, is Tadinko a Chamorro last name? Is Gatewood, is Johnson a Chamorro last name? Is Ilao, a Chamorro last name? So you have to take a look at that, and you really have to, judge for yourself that conflict of interest. If this is anything Chamorro, and you're Chamorro, there's a conflict of interest. Why did you then vote in favor of that conflict of interest? And you know full well that your parents have been here since before 1950, and your grandparents have been here 1950. Why didn't you, resign from that position, or get out of that position? Is Berdalio a Chamorro last name? Is Manabusan a Chamorro last name? And these are last names of judges of U.S. District Court and the Superior Court. The conflict of interest. Yes, the glaring conflict of interest. And I don't know why I'm so racist. And you've been socialized as such, Judge, that, not to see, it's like, it's not there. Color of my skin, I'm white, I'm black. Okay, content of character, assassination, content of character. So it becomes that much more of a precedent. It becomes so important and crucial, especially if we haven't released information about contact tracing in the last election cycle of how many people caught COVID-19 as vaccinated, boosted, and then died. They just went to go and exercise their U.S. citizenship rights, and so am I. So what the letter is, this letter addressed to the Guam Election Commission seeks to inform the Guam Election Commission that I am submitting my name, Jonathan Diaz, and combination of names thereof below for consideration as a write-in candidate as an independent, right? Not to step on Democrats and Republicans, as an independent. My name and any of the names submitted to the Guam Election Commission shall be connected to the number of write-in votes on my behalf. However, in the past, these specific laws were changed. They were. And we know the sponsors and, went through this proper vetting, with the Guam legislature. But again, is 15 senators actually 21? Because that was ruled, right? It was, yes, it's organic, but that was ruled in our local courts. But it wasn't ruled, in the Ninth District Court at all, because here the Guam legislature is telling the federal government what to do with regards to write-in votes, and it's supposed to be U.S. Congress because we got U.S. citizenship from U.S. Congress to make these rules and regulations when it comes to this. So this is the gray area. On my behalf, right? The number of write-in votes. So in the past is there was no law really. And what makes, as an independent, or Green Party, what gives the right of that Republican or that Democrat, working together and voting together to tell me and my party, my political party, what to do? You don't have a right. Just because you're an organized political party, certified, with your revenue and taxation and then your publication. When was the last time the Republican Party, circulated an ad about how much their assets were and expenditures, and they're supposed to, and they never did. The same thing with the Democrat Party of Guam. And it's supposed to be a certain amount of days before the actual election. So we don't have a fair and fair election because we don't have an educated electorate and registered voters. Come on, let's just be honest about that. You don't even know what platform that person is. But, this is the issue of organized political party. When was the last time? I haven't seen it in a circulation of newsprint at all. What's the assets of the political parties, organized political party? Never. Even in 2012, 2008, there was, up to now, there's none. There has been none. And you're supposed to do that to maintain your 501c3 status or your political party status, the revenue tax. So that those are issues, right? And the administering power. But anyways, so then it used to be the case where you had to write in, let's say Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, okay? Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck are very important because they are actual characters, in created there in administering power. Okay, so I feel honored, being Mickey Mouse. But it used to be the case where, Mickey Mouse garnered, 5 votes. Okay, Donald Duck garnered 10 votes. Okay, it used to be like that, but now it's just we just received 15 votes, write-in votes, not connected at all to names. So that's what the Guam legislature decided to do, and I think that's a very great disservice to U.S. citizenship, second-class citizenship, you know. So insular, the insular cases also, doesn't do that. Okay, so there's no issues there, but this is what I mean by equalizing the election and why it's so important to protest, nonviolence and peaceful protest. So it's been one act of, for me, of passive and active resistance in that process. But just throw in, my name in there so that we could never have a 50% plus one. It's very important to understand that maneuvering, because if you don't want to resign from the position, okay, well, we need to make sure that there's no 50% plus one. Now, 50%, my understanding of what was communicated with me, and don't quote me, I'm not a lawyer, and I didn't create the law with Senator Burton, but nor was I a staff member under, a former congressperson that created the position in the 1970s in the legalese language. So the issue is 50%. So 50% was the total number of registered voters. Okay, 50%. So on the election day, 50%, okay, of total registered voters. So let's say before the elections take place and we don't have an understanding of early voting because other jurisdictions in the United States do not do early voting. They actually don't. And there's a issue with early voting. You know, there has always been absentee ballots. It's always been absentee ballots. So the issue becomes that now there's several different election days and the power and the right to vote. So there's several different well, when did you go vote? Oh, I went on November 3rd, and it's an actual holiday here in Guam. I went on November 3rd, November 2nd, excuse me, November 2nd, and officially it's you're not supposed to have Tuesday, Thursdays, and it gets to this point, where yes, okay, when is the vote? I don't know. Okay, if you don't know, then why are you even voting? Why are you even registered? So the issue is, okay, and then, but going down the line here is like, they're supposed to a second Tuesday. I mean, Monday of the month of November, and it's how it started when we got the governor and lieutenant governor Carlton Skinner at second Tuesday of November. Okay, something like that, and it's like, okay, well, there's Tuesday, but the issue becomes now, the silent majority. The silent majority is, the total registered voters is 57,900. I don't know. I'm just making these numbers up. 57,000, out of a population of 160 plus or minus, number of people here on the island of Guam. 57,988. Okay. So half of that is 50%, correct? Okay. So if 50%, it has the number of people who come out on that day have to reach 25,000, or a little bit plus or minus. So it's 50,000. So it's like number of registered voters, 50,000 people before the election day. So 25% of those people have to come out to vote. They have to. The plus one is the actual day of the vote, the plus or the minus, because you have people, and that's debatable. See, so it becomes debatable. And so something that becomes debatable because you've been just going by popular vote of 51%. So 17,000 in the last election is 50%. It's not. It's popular vote. So, Guam has never achieved a 50% plus one rule. Now, 50% is the total number registered before the actual date. So the 25,000 people have to come out to vote in order for that person to be certified. So that's how one person in the past had told me, because it follows the U.S. presidency rules and regulations, because the president of the United States has to meet that threshold of 50% plus one. And so all the 50 states, okay, that's where the 50% comes from, 50 states, right? So in that, there has to be a threshold of the total number in the electoral college. That's how the electoral college gets in. And the plus one is those people who actually come out to vote. So that's where there's some misunderstanding and miscommunication when it comes to the governor / lieutenant governor position, because that's the nominating position. It's or, right? So if it's an or, then it should have, the lieutenant governor should have its own nominating position. But anyways, that's 50% plus one, as well as the non-voting delegate position. So the other issue, so again, the names submitted to the Guam Election Commission shall be connected to the number of write-in votes on my behalf. So in the past, it has been where they took my name and they now counted the number, right? Connected. Now it's we only receive 50 write-in votes. That's it. How many names? Oh, I don't know. It's not connected, and that's where we're at. So there's an unlawful discrepancy in the enforcement and interpretation of the 50% plus one. So you could take a look, and it should be like this letter should be posted in the Guam Election Commission. It should also be a free service to Guam media, right? Guam media is supposed to put my name out there, free and fair election. They have to print something on their own. I don't have to pay. They have to print because it's a service to U.S. citizenship. Okay, U.S. citizenship rights. So there's laws that you have to, right? But because public service is government hold meetings at such and such time if you need, assistance. So print, radio, you're supposed to create ads for write-ins, and this is official. And I'm not supposed to pay 1 cent whatsoever because it's taxed. You're given grants, by the FCC. You have your own license. If you don't do so, right, the issue becomes now then you're protecting Democrat Party and Republican Party that has never printed their assets, expenditures, okay, up to date. So, that's the issue that we want to address. And, these are the name combinations. So make sure that the voters who are registered are actually educated, because if they're not, then we don't have a free and fair election. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Sorry if I don't look good. I'm not in a tie. It's just a hot day. My dogs are barking out there. But have a wonderful day and take care. Adios.